It starts with something small enough that Darian almost misses it himself. Welcome back to Episode 2 of the Alpha Contract. If you haven't seen how it began, the boardroom, the contract, the two men who swore this would never be anything more than paperwork, you may want to go back and watch Episode 1 first, because everything that happens from here builds on everything that came before it. Darian has been running on 4 hours of sleep for the better part of a week, a string of overnight shifts, a surgery that ran long, a foundation board meeting he sat through with his eyes burning behind his glasses. He tells himself he's fine. He has told himself he's fine for most of his adult life, and it has always, more or less, worked. Cassian notices before Darian says a word about it. He notices the way Darian reads the same line of a medical journal 3 times without absorbing it. He notices the extra beat of silence before Darian answers a question, as if the words have to travel further than they used to. He notices, because noticing has quietly become something he does now without meaning to. He doesn't say anything about it directly. That isn't how either of them operates yet. Instead, meetings get rescheduled that Darian never asked to have moved. A car is waiting outside the hospital exactly when his shift ends, 3 days running, with no explanation attached. The refrigerator, which had been stocked with the sort of things two busy men buy when neither is really paying attention, starts filling with things that don't need cooking, things a man too tired to stand at a stove could still manage to eat. Darian notices on the 4th day. Did you do this? He's holding up a container of soup that wasn't there yesterday. Expression somewhere between suspicion and something softer he isn't ready to name. Do what? The car. The meetings. This. He gestures at the refrigerator like it's evidence in a trial. I know you didn't suddenly develop an interest in my nutrition. I have no idea what you're talking about. Cassian doesn't look up from his laptop, which is itself a tell, because Cassian always looks up. Looking away is the closest thing he has to admitting something. You're a terrible liar. I run a company worth more than most countries' GDP. I assure you, I'm an excellent liar. Not with me. Darian sets the container down, quieter now. You're just not very good at it with me. Cassian doesn't answer that. He closes the laptop instead, which is its own kind of answer, and for a moment neither of them says anything at all. I'm not fragile, Darian says finally. I don't need managing. I'm not managing you. A pause. I'm removing obstacles. There's a difference. That sounded rehearsed. Everything I say sounds rehearsed. It's a professional skill. Darian almost smiles at that. The real one. The one that started appearing more often than either of them will admit to tracking. He sits down across from Cassian instead of walking away, which is its own quiet shift neither of them names out loud. Thank you, he says. Just that. No qualification, no deflection. Cassian looks at him for a long moment, like the words have landed somewhere he wasn't braced for. You're welcome, he says, and it comes out rougher than he intends, like the sentence isn't one he's used to saying and means it at the same time. If you're finding yourself rooting for these two the way I am, now's a good time to hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The next part of their story is coming, and you won't want to miss it. Later that night, Darian falls asleep on the couch mid-sentence, still in his coat, a medical journal open and forgotten on his chest. Cassian finds him there an hour later. He doesn't wake him. He takes the journal, marks the page without being asked, sets it on the table within reach, and drapes a throw blanket over him with the same careful precision he uses for everything else in his life. Except this time, there's no audience, no leverage, no reason to do it well except that it's Darian, and some part of Cassian has stopped needing a reason. He stands there a moment longer than the task requires. Then he turns off the lamp and lets the room go dark and quiet around the one person, it turns out, he has never once had to perform for. The dinner was Cassian's grandfather's idea, and refusing it was never actually an option, whatever the invitation pretended to offer. It's a small gathering by the family standards, a handful of Way elders, 2 Liu family associates, a private room in a restaurant old enough that the walls have absorbed 3 generations of careful conversation. Darian recognizes exactly one other guest, a distant cousin of his mother's he hasn't seen since the funeral. Cassian recognizes everyone, and likes almost none of them. The evening is civil in the specific way old money is civil. Every insult wrapped in a compliment, every question a small test. It's an elderly Way relative, 3 glasses of wine into the evening, who says the thing that shifts the air in the room. Strange, isn't it? he says, to no one and everyone. That Alu would agree to marry into this family. After everything. After what exactly? Darian's voice is calm, but there's an edge underneath it now, the kind he doesn't often let show in public. The old man waves a hand, as if the answer is obvious, as if he's surprised he has to say it at all. The factory contracts. 20 years ago. Everyone knows the way family took what belonged to the Lu Foundation and called it a merger. Cassian's jaw tightens. That is not what happened. That's what your grandfather always says. The old man shrugs, unbothered. The way people are unbothered when they've never had to live with the consequences of a story they only heard secondhand. I only know what everyone else knows. Darian looks at Cassian, really looks at him, searching for something in his expression, and finds only controlled fury, the kind that has clearly been controlled for a very long time. I was 14, Darian says quietly, when my mother stopped speaking about the Wei family entirely. I always assumed there was a reason. I didn't know it was this specific. It isn't true, Cassian says. Just that. Flat, certain, offering no further explanation, because explaining would mean admitting he doesn't fully know what the truth actually is either. Only that it isn't the version this room has decided to believe. The dinner ends earlier than planned. Nobody says why. If this story has you wondering just as much as Darian is right now, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on. The next part is where things start to unravel, and you won't want to miss it. 3 days later, the consequences arrive in a form neither of them expected. A logistics partnership Cassian has been finalizing for 8 months, a deal that would stabilize Wei International's supply chain for the next decade, collapses overnight. The partner's statement is careful, corporate, bloodless. Given recent developments in Mr. Wei's personal circumstances, we've decided to pursue other options at this time. Cassian reads it twice, standing perfectly still in his office, the city spread out cold and indifferent behind him. Personal circumstances, he repeats, to no one. His assistant, hovering near the door, doesn't quite meet his eyes. There's been talk, sir, about the marriage. Some of our partners are conservative. 2 alphas. It makes people uncomfortable in ways they won't say directly. So they'll cancel a decade of stability over something that has nothing to do with the business. It has everything to do with the business, sir. To them. Cassian says nothing for a long moment. Then he picks up his phone, calls Darian, and says only 4 words before hanging up. Come home. We're fine. He isn't sure, saying it, whether he means it as reassurance or as something he's still trying to convince himself of. The invitation arrives a week later, gold embossed and impossible to decline. The Shanghai Business Alliance's annual summit. The kind of event where deals are made in hallway conversations and reputations are quietly buried in the space between 2 sentences. Cassian doesn't want to go. He goes anyway, because not going would say more than going ever could. Darian wasn't originally meant to attend. He comes anyway, without being asked, dressed and ready an hour before Cassian even mentions the event, and when Cassian raises an eyebrow at him in the hallway, Darian only shrugs. You didn't think I'd let you walk into that alone, did you? I've walked into worse alone. I know. I'd still rather you didn't. The summit is exactly the kind of room built to make a person feel small without ever raising its voice. Cassian moves through it the way he moves through every room like it, controlled, unreadable, giving nothing away. It's working, mostly, until the man from the collapsed logistics deal finds him near the bar, flanked by 2 associates, wine in hand, and an expression that suggests he's been waiting all evening for exactly this moment. Wei, I wondered if you'd have the nerve to show up. Song, I wondered if you'd have the tact not to mention it. We were both wrong tonight, it seems. Careful. Song's smile doesn't reach his eyes. A man in your position should be more careful who he embarrasses in public, especially given how unconventional your circumstances have become. Cassian's expression doesn't change, but something in his posture does. A tightening, small, and precise, the kind only someone paying very close attention would catch. Darian catches it. Mr. Song, is it? Darian steps forward before Cassian can answer, voice pleasant, almost warm, which somehow makes what follows land harder. I heard about your daughter's surgery last spring. Cardiac, wasn't it? I consulted on a similar case around the same time. Song's smile falters slightly. Ah, yes. She's recovering well. I'm glad. It's a difficult procedure. The surgeon who did it, Dr. Anwin, is excellent. Meticulous, thorough, very careful about who she trusts in an operating room. Darian's tone stays perfectly even, perfectly kind. It's strange, isn't it? How much trust we're willing to place in people we've never publicly humiliated over a business decision. Funny how that works. The silence that follows is very brief and very complete. I should circulate, Song says, already retreating. Wait, doctor. He doesn't wait for a response. For a long moment, Cassian says nothing at all. Then, quietly, almost to himself, you didn't have to do that. I know. Darian picks up a glass of water from a passing tray, unbothered, as if he hasn't just dismantled a man in 4 sentences without raising his voice. I wanted to. That man could make things difficult for you too, you know? Professionally. Let him try. Darian looks at him then, steady and certain. I didn't spend my life becoming a surgeon so I could watch someone corner my husband and say nothing. The word husband sits between them for a moment, heavier than either of them expected it to be, spoken so plainly it startles them both. If this is the moment you've been waiting for, the one where they finally start choosing each other out loud, don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications, because the story only gets more intense from here. Neither of them mentions the word again that night. But in the car afterward, Cassian reaches over without a word and takes Darian's hand, holding it the entire ride home, silent and certain, like something has finally been decided that neither of them needed to say out loud. Darian doesn't pull away. He doesn't say anything either. He doesn't have to. It happens on an ordinary Tuesday, which is somehow worse. The kind of day that gives no warning, no dramatic build-up, just an early morning phone call that changes the shape of everything that follows. Cassian is in a meeting when his phone lights up with his grandfather's private physician's name, and he knows, before he even answers, that something is wrong. He excuses himself without explanation, which is unlike him, and the room goes quiet in his absence in a way it never has before. Chairman Wei, your grandfather collapsed this morning. We believe it's cardiac. He's being taken to Shanghai General now. The words land somewhere Cassian doesn't have language for. He has built his entire life around the idea that control means nothing can touch him unprepared. This does. He doesn't call his assistant. He doesn't call the board. The first name his fingers find, without thinking, without deciding to, is Darian's. I need you, he says, and the words come out raw, stripped of every rehearsed thing he's ever said to anyone. My grandfather. Cardiac. Shanghai General. I'm already moving. Darian's voice is instantly different, sharper, focused, the voice of someone whose entire life has trained him for exactly this moment. 15 minutes. Don't drive yourself. You're not steady enough right now, and I need you steady when we get there. He's right, and Cassian hates that he's right, and is grateful for it in the same breath. By the time Cassian arrives at the hospital, Darian is already there. He beat him there, coat still on, badge already flashed at the front desk, pulling rank in favors Cassian didn't know he had to get real answers instead of the careful, hedged language hospitals give family members who aren't doctors themselves. 90% blockage in the left anterior descending artery, Darian says, low and clear, the moment Cassian is close enough to hear. They're taking him into surgery now. Dr. Chun is one of the best cardiac surgeons in Shanghai. I trained under her. He's in good hands. Is he going to survive this? I'm not going to lie to you. Darian holds his gaze steadily. The next few hours matter. But he's strong, and Chun is exceptional, and I will personally make sure nothing that can be controlled goes wrong. That's what I can promise you. Cassian nods, once, and something in his chest that has been holding perfectly rigid for the last 20 minutes finally, quietly, gives way. They wait. Hours pass the way hospital hours always do. Too slow and somehow gone all at once. Cassian doesn't sit. He stands by the window of the waiting room, arms crossed, jaw locked, the picture of composure to anyone who doesn't know him well enough to see through it. Darian knows him well enough now. He doesn't try to make him sit. He doesn't offer empty reassurances. He simply stands beside him at the window, close enough that their shoulders nearly touch, saying nothing, present in the specific way that asks for nothing in return. You don't have to stay, Cassian says eventually, not looking at him. You've probably been on shift since dawn. I know I don't have to. Darian doesn't move. I'm staying anyway. Why? Darian is quiet for a moment, choosing the answer carefully, the way he chooses everything. Because 6 months ago, this would have been someone else's family and someone else's tragedy, and I wouldn't have thought twice about going home to sleep. He finally looks over at Cassian. It isn't someone else's anymore. I don't know exactly when that changed, but it did. Cassian doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. He reaches over instead and takes Darian's hand, holding it the way he held it in the car after the summit. Silent, certain, needing no further explanation. If you've made it this far into their story and you're feeling everything I'm feeling right now, this is exactly the moment to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next changes everything between them. 3 hours later, Dr. Chun emerges from surgery, mask still hanging around her neck, exhaustion and relief written plainly on her face. The surgery was successful. He's stable. It's going to be a long recovery, but he's going to be all right. Cassian's knees nearly give out with the relief of it. Darian catches his arm before anyone else notices, steadying him the way he's steadied him all night, without making a single show of it. "Thank you," Cassian says, to Chun, to Darian, to whatever version of luck decided to let this end differently than it could have. Darian only nods, still holding his arm a moment longer than strictly necessary. "I told you," he says quietly. "Good hands." Later, sitting together in the recovery ward hallway, waiting for the old man to wake, Cassian speaks without looking over, his voice quieter than Darian has ever heard it. "I don't know how to do this. Needing someone. I've never let myself. You don't have to know how." Darian's hand finds his again, steady, sure. "You just have to let it happen. I'll be here either way." For the first time since the contract was signed, Cassian believes him completely. His grandfather wakes 2 days later, weak but lucid, and the first thing he does, before asking about the company, before asking about the board, is ask where Darian is. "The doctor," the old man rasps, when Cassian looks confused. "The one who's been in the hallway every time I open my eyes. Bring him in." Darian comes in quietly, hands in his coat pockets, and sits at the old man's bedside like he's done this 1,000 times before, because in a way, he has. "You have good color today," Darian says. "Better than yesterday. You would know. You've been here more than my own grandson's staff put together." The old man's eyes flick toward Cassian, sharp even now, even weakened. "He didn't leave your side either, from what the nurses tell me." "He didn't," Darian agrees. "Good." The old man closes his eyes again, satisfied, like he's confirmed something he'd long suspected. "Good." That evening, for the first time in weeks, neither of them has anywhere to be. The penthouse is quiet in a way it rarely is. No meetings pulling at Cassian's attention, no pager threatening to interrupt Darian mid-sentence. They end up on the couch without quite deciding to, Darian's legs stretched across Cassian's lap, like it's the most natural thing in the world, a bowl of reheated soup between them that neither of them has the energy to actually eat. "You should sleep," Darian says, watching Cassian rub at his eyes. "You haven't properly slept in 3 days. You're one to talk. I'm trained for this. You're not. I'm trained for worse things than sleep deprivation. Not the same kind of worse." Darian's voice softens. "This kind doesn't respond to being controlled, Cassian. Believe me, I've spent my whole career learning that the hard way." Cassian doesn't answer right away. He looks at Darian instead. Really looks at him, the exhaustion around his eyes, the loyalty that's been quietly, steadily present through every hour of the last 3 days without once asking for anything in return. "Can I tell you something?" Cassian says finally. "That I've never told anyone? Always. I used to think needing someone was the same thing as being weak. My father taught me that. He taught me it so thoroughly I never once questioned it. Not once in 30 years. He pauses, choosing the next words carefully, like they cost something to say. "I don't think that anymore. I think I spent 30 years being strong and completely alone, and I called it strength because I didn't know there was another word for it." Darian goes very still, listening. "There is another word for it," he says quietly. "It's called being afraid. I know that now." Cassian reaches over, tucking a strand of hair behind Darian's ear, a gesture so unlike him, so unguarded, that they both notice it happening. "I'm not afraid anymore. Not of this, anyway. If this moment is hitting you the way it's hitting me, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because what these two have built together is about to be tested, and you won't want to miss a second of it." Darian doesn't say anything. He simply closes the distance between them, slow enough that Cassian has every opportunity to stop it, and kisses him. Soft, unhurried, nothing like the calculated performance from the gala months ago, nothing for anyone else to see or believe. Just the two of them, finally, choosing this because they want it and not because a contract requires it. When they pull apart, Cassian's forehead rests against his, both of them breathing like something important just happened, because it has. That wasn't in the contract, Darian murmurs. No, a faint, real smile, the kind Cassian almost never lets anyone see. It wasn't. Any complaints? None whatsoever. Outside, the city keeps moving the way it always does, indifferent to the two men finally, quietly, becoming something neither of their families planned for and neither of them is willing to give up. For the first time since the papers were signed, the penthouse doesn't feel like a transaction with a witness list. It feels, for the first time, like home. Somewhere across the city, in an office no one in this story has visited yet, a phone call is being made. Quiet, careful, deliberate. A voice on the other end listens, says very little, and hangs up with the kind of satisfaction that only comes from watching a plan unfold exactly as intended. Whatever peace Cassian and Darian have found tonight, it didn't happen in a vacuum. Some things are still moving in the dark, waiting for the right moment to surface. But that's a story for another time. Tonight, in a quiet penthouse above a city that never quite stops moving, two men who were never supposed to need anyone have finally let themselves need each other. And for now, that's enough. Thank you so much for spending this episode with Cassian and Darian. If their story has pulled you in the way I hope it has, this is the perfect moment to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because episode 3 of the Alpha Contract is coming very soon, and it's going to change everything you think you know about how they got here. The truth behind the Wei and Liu families is about to surface, and not everyone wants it to. See you in the next chapter.